The red on-air light was still glowing when Laura Ingraham realized she had made a terrible mistake, but by then Angelina Jolie had already begun speaking, and what came out of her mouth over the next 3 minutes would not only end the interview but would haunt the conservative host for the rest of her career. The actress hadn't raised her voice, hadn't shown anger, hadn't done any of the things Ingraham had expected when she'd ambushed her with the question about choosing Middle Eastern refugees over American children. Instead, Angelina had simply told the truth, with such devastating precision that even the camera operators had stopped breathing, and when she finished, the silence in the Fox News studio was so complete you could hear Ingraham's papers trembling in her hands. It was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. September 2019, Angelina was there to discuss her new film, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. The pre-interview negotiations had been clear: film questions only, no personal life, no politics, no Brad Pitt. Fox News had agreed, desperate to have an A-list Hollywood star on their show, someone who could bring viewers from outside their usual demographic. Laura Ingraham had smiled, had shaken hands, had promised to keep things professional, but promises meant nothing when ratings were on the line. The first 10 minutes had gone smoothly. Angelina discussed her character, the costume design, working with Elle Fanning. She was poised, professional, giving the kind of answers that publicists dream about. Ingraham seemed engaged, even charming, laughing at the right moments, asking follow-up questions that showed she'd done her homework. The studio audience was captivated. Everything was going according to plan. Then Ingram's expression shifted. It was subtle, a tightening around the eyes, a slight forward lean, but Angelina recognized it immediately. She'd seen it before, in dozens of interviews over the years. It was the look of a journalist about to go off script, about to ask the question they'd been told not to ask. "Angelina," Ingraham began, her voice taking on that prosecutorial tone her viewers loved, "I have to ask you something that I think our audience really wants to know." The publicists standing off camera tensed, the Fox News producers exchanged glances. They knew what was coming, had probably planned it, had likely encouraged it. Ambush interviews got views, created viral moments, generated the kind of controversy that kept people talking. But here's what nobody expected to happen next. You spend millions of dollars, countless hours, traveling to places like Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ingraham continued, her voice growing harder with each word. "Meanwhile, we have American children right here in Detroit, in Appalachia, in the Bronx, who are suffering, who are hungry, who need help. Don't you think it's hypocritical, even anti-American, to prioritize foreign refugees over our own citizens?" The audience gasped. Some nodded in agreement, others looked uncomfortable. The camera stayed tight on Angelina's face, waiting for the explosion, the Hollywood liberal meltdown that would play on repeat for the next news cycle. But Angelina didn't explode. She didn't even blink. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if considering something profound, and then she smiled. Not the movie star smile she'd worn moments before, but something else, something that made Ingraham involuntarily lean back. "Laura," Angelina began, and her voice was so calm, so measured, that it somehow made the studio feel smaller. "I'm going to answer your question, but first I want to make sure I understand it correctly. You're asking me why I care about children who were born on the wrong side of an imaginary line." Ingraham started to interject, but Angelina raised her hand, not aggressively, just a gentle gesture that somehow commanded complete silence. "No, please, let me finish. You invited me here, you asked the question. The least you can do is let me answer it." What happened over the next 3 minutes would later be described by witnesses as the most devastating takedown in television history. "Last month," Angelina continued, "I was in a refugee camp in Jordan. I met a 6-year-old girl named Amira. She had watched her parents die in a bombing in Aleppo. The explosion took her left leg. She traveled for 3 days, bleeding, carried by strangers to reach that camp. When I met her, do you know what she was doing? She was teaching other children to write, using a stick in the dirt, because they had no pencils, no paper, no school." The studio was completely silent now. Even the usual background noise, shuffling papers, clearing throats, shifting chairs, had stopped. "That same week," Angelina continued, "I donated $500,000 to schools in Detroit. The week before that, I funded a mobile health clinic in rural Kentucky. The week before that, I paid for clean water systems in 3 Native American reservations. But you didn't know that, did you? Because I don't call Fox News every time I write a check." But wait, here's where the story gets even more intense. Ingraham tried to regain control, but surely you can understand why Americans might feel. "What I understand," Angelina interrupted, and now there was steel in her voice, "is that you're using children, American children, as props in your political theater. You don't actually care about the kids in Detroit or Appalachia. When was the last time you visited them? When was the last time Fox News ran a primetime special on child poverty in America? When was the last time you personally, Laura, wrote a check to help them? Ingraham's face was reddening, but Angelina wasn't done. I have the financial records right here, Angelina said, pulling out her phone. Would you like me to read them? $32 million donated to American causes in the last 5 years. 14 schools built or renovated. 6 hospitals, 12 homeless shelters. All of it done quietly, without cameras, without publicity, because that's not why you do it. She looked directly into the camera now, speaking not to Ingraham but to the audience. But here's what you really want to know, isn't it? Why do I care about refugees? Why do I care about people who aren't American? The answer is simple, because a child dying of hunger in Syria feels the same pain as a child dying of hunger in Detroit. Because a mother crying over her baby in Afghanistan sounds exactly like a mother crying in Alabama. Because suffering doesn't check your passport. The most shocking part was still coming. You want to know what's really anti-American? Angelina asked, turning back to Ingraham. Using patriotism as an excuse for cruelty. Wrapping selfishness in the flag. Teaching people that compassion has borders. That's not the America I know. That's not the America that saved refugees from World War II, that welcomed the Irish during the famine, that opened its doors to those fleeing communism. Ingraham attempted one more time to salvage the situation. But we have to take care of our own first. No, Angelina said, and the single word carried such weight that Ingraham actually flinched. That's the lie, isn't it? That it's either or. That helping a Syrian child means not helping an American child. That's the false choice you're selling, and it's poisonous. We can do both. We should do both. We must do both. She stood up then, removing her microphone with practiced ease, but she wasn't quite finished. You know what I find interesting, Laura? You make $8 million a year. This studio, these cameras, this show, it's all worth hundreds of millions. Fox News had $4 billion in revenue last year. How much of that went to those American children you're so concerned about? How many schools did you build? How many meals did you provide? Or is caring about American children only important when you can use it to attack someone who's actually helping? The silence that followed was deafening. But then something unexpected occurred. From the studio audience, a single person began to clap. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, half the audience at a Fox News taping was applauding Angelina Jolie. Ingraham looked frantically at her producers, but they seemed frozen, unsure how to respond to their own audience's betrayal. Angelina wasn't done with her devastating precision. She pulled out a photograph from her bag, walked over to Ingraham's desk, and placed it in front of the host. "This is Amira," she said, her voice now soft but somehow more powerful for it. "The 6-year-old I mentioned, she's watching this show right now. We set up a satellite connection at the camp so she could see American television for the first time. She was so excited to see America, the country she dreams of coming to someday, the country she believes represents hope and freedom and kindness." Ingraham looked down at the photo, a little girl with bright eyes and a prosthetic leg, smiling despite everything she'd endured. "What do you think she's learning about America right now?" Angelina asked. "What do you think she's learning about us? Watching you use her suffering as a political talking point. Watching you argue that she doesn't deserve help because she was born in the wrong place. Here's the moment that broke everything." Ingraham, flustered and defensive, made a fatal error. "Well, if she's watching, maybe she should know that America can't save everyone. We're not the world's charity." The gasp from the audience was audible. Even Ingraham seemed to realize she'd gone too far, speaking directly to a 6-year-old refugee with one leg. But it was too late. Angelina looked directly into the camera, knowing Amira was watching. "Habibti," she said in Arabic, then switched to English. "Sweetheart, don't listen to her. America is better than this. Americans are better than this. There are millions of people here who would welcome you with open arms, who understand that kindness doesn't make us weak, it makes us strong, who know that helping others doesn't diminish us, it defines us." Then she turned back to Ingraham, and when she spoke, her voice was so quiet the microphones almost didn't pick it up. "Shame on you," she said. "Shame on you for using children's suffering as entertainment. Shame on you for teaching hate instead of help. Shame on you for making that little girl question whether America is the beacon of hope she believed it to be." What transpired next shocked even the Fox News veterans. Angelina walked toward the exit, but before leaving, she stopped and addressed the audience one more time. "To those of you who agree with Miss Ingraham, I respect your opinion, but I ask you this: go visit a refugee camp, just once. Look into the eyes of a child who has lost everything and tell them they don't deserve help because they're not American. If you can do that, if you can look at that child and feel nothing, then we have nothing more to discuss, but I don't think you can. I think you're better than that. I think we're all better than that." As she reached the door, One of the audience members, an older veteran wearing a Marine's cap, stood up and saluted her. "My squad saved refugees in Vietnam," he called out. "You're right, ma'am. Helping others is the most American thing there is." The dam broke. Other audience members began standing, sharing their own stories. A woman talked about her grandparents fleeing the Holocaust. A man mentioned his church's mission trips to Haiti. Even some of Ingraham's most loyal viewers were turning against the narrative she'd tried to create. But the most devastating blow was still to come. Ingraham, desperate to regain control, shouted after Angelina, "This is exactly the kind of liberal grandstanding." Angelina stopped at the door and turned around one last time. "I'm not a liberal, Laura. I'm not a conservative. I'm a human being who sees other human beings suffering and tries to help. The fact that you think that's political says everything about what's wrong with this conversation." She paused, then delivered the final blow. "By the way, your network called me 16 times to get me on this show. You wanted the ratings that come with my name. You're going to use this interview to sell advertisements to make money, and that's fine. But while you're counting your profits from this segment, remember that you could have used this platform to actually help those American children you claim to care about. Instead, you chose to use it for this. That's your choice, but it's also your legacy." And then she was gone. What occurred in the studio after her exit was chaos. Ingraham tried to go to commercial, but the control room was in disarray. The producers were fielding angry calls from network executives. The audience was in open revolt, with several people walking out. The crew members were exchanging stunned looks, some of them openly admiring Angelina's courage. When they finally returned from commercial, Ingraham attempted damage control. She claimed Angelina had been triggered and emotional, that she had stormed off rather than engage in reasonable debate. But the footage told a different story. Angelina had been calm, collected, devastating in her precision. It was Ingraham who looked emotional, flustered, out of her depth. Within hours, the interview went viral, but not in the way Fox News had hoped. "Angelina destroys Laura" was trending worldwide. The clip of Angelina saying suffering doesn't check your passport was shared millions of times. Even conservative commentators were admitting that Ingraham had been outclassed. But here's the part that Fox News tried to suppress. After the show, 3 of Ingraham's staff members quietly resigned. One of them, a young producer named Sarah, later revealed what happened behind the scenes. Ingraham had specifically planned the ambush, had researched Angelina's humanitarian work looking for angles of attack, had even prepared graphics about American poverty to use as weapons. "She thought she could break her," Sarah said in a later interview. "She thought Angelina would get defensive or angry, and that would be the story. She never expected her to respond with facts, with grace, with such moral clarity that it made us all question what we were doing there." The aftermath was even more dramatic than the interview itself. Within 24 hours, Angelina had posted all her financial records online, showing every donation she'd made to both American and international causes. The total was staggering, over $100 million of her own money over 2 decades. She also released a list of every American organization she'd supported, from Detroit schools to Appalachian health clinics to Native American reservations. The contrast with Fox News was stark. Investigative journalists quickly discovered that despite its billions in revenue, Fox News's charitable giving was minimal. Ingraham herself, despite her $8 million salary, had no significant charitable donations on record. But the real victory came from an unexpected source. Amira, the 6-year-old refugee, had indeed watched the interview. Through a translator, she sent a message that was posted on the UN Refugee Agency's website. "Thank you, Miss Angelina, for defending me. I still want to come to America someday. I know not all Americans are like the angry lady. I will study hard and become a doctor and help American children when I grow up, to say thank you for the good Americans who helped me." The message went viral, shared even by some conservative politicians who couldn't argue with the grace of a 6-year-old refugee. Here's what makes this story even more powerful. Ingraham tried to have the interview buried. Fox News pulled it from their website, refused to upload it to YouTube, tried to copyright strike anyone who shared it. But it was too late. The internet had preserved it, and it became one of the most watched political moments of the year. Angelina never spoke publicly about the interview again. She didn't need to. Her words had been clear, her message undeniable. But she did do one thing that spoke volumes. A month after the interview, she quietly paid for Amira and 12 other child refugees to receive advanced medical care in Jordan. She also funded a school at the refugee camp, with enough resources to operate for 10 years. She named it the American Dream School, a subtle but pointed reminder of what America was supposed to represent. Ingraham's show lost 3 major advertisers in the week following the interview. Her ratings, which initially spiked from the controversy, began a steady decline. She never mentioned Angelina Jolie again on air. and when colleagues brought up the interview, she would quickly change the subject. But perhaps the most telling response came from an unexpected source. 3 months after the interview, a group of Fox News viewers inspired by Angelina's words started a charity called Americans Helping Everyone. They raised money for both American poverty and refugee assistance, explicitly citing the interview as their inspiration. Their motto was simple: compassion has no borders. The charity raised $2 million in its first year. Years later, when asked about the Fox News incident in a BBC interview, Angelina gave only a brief response: "I said what needed to be said." The fact that it was controversial says more about our current moment than about the message itself, but those who were in the studio that day knew the truth. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment when celebrity privilege was used not for self-promotion, but for moral clarity, when fame became a platform not for ego, but for empathy, when a Hollywood actress walked into the lion's den of conservative media and emerged not just unscathed, but victorious. The studio where it happened was renovated shortly after. Some of the crew members joked that it was to remove the scorch marks from where Angelina had stood, but others say it was because the place had been transformed, that after witnessing such raw truth, such unapologetic compassion, the old studio couldn't contain the weight of what had happened there. Laura Ingraham still hosts her show, but those who know her say she's never quite recovered from that day. She still attacks Hollywood liberals, still questions humanitarian efforts, still wraps herself in false patriotism. But there's something different now. A hesitation, a flicker of doubt, as if she's always waiting for another Angelina Jolie to walk through the door and expose her again. As for Angelina, she continued her work, unbothered by the criticism, unmoved by the controversy. She knew what she had always known, that helping others wasn't about politics or nationalism or publicity. It was about recognizing humanity in all its forms, across all its borders, despite all its differences. The interview became required viewing in several journalism schools, a masterclass in how to handle hostile questioning with grace and truth. It was also shown in refugee camps around the world, translated into dozens of languages, proof that someone with power and privilege had stood up for them on one of America's biggest platforms. But the final word belongs to Amira. 5 years after the interview, now 11 years old and living in a refugee camp in Jordan, she was interviewed by the BBC. They asked her if she still wanted to come to America after what she had seen on Fox News. Her answer was simple but profound: "Yes, because I learned that day that there are two Americas. The America of the angry lady who thinks I don't deserve help, and the America of Miss Angelina, who knows that all children deserve love. I want to go to Miss Angelina's America." When Ingram's producers saw the BBC interview, they reportedly suggested defending their host's position from 5 years earlier. Ingram's response was telling: "Never mention that interview again, ever." But the internet never forgets. The clip continues to circulate, continues to inspire, continues to remind people that sometimes, in the face of calculated cruelty, the most radical thing you can do is simply tell the truth with compassion. And in that Fox News studio, on that September day in 2019, Angelina Jolie did exactly that. She walked into a trap designed to humiliate her and instead delivered a masterclass in moral clarity that left her attackers speechless and her audience transformed. The red on-air light had stayed on throughout the entire exchange, broadcasting every word to millions of viewers. And when it finally went dark, when the cameras stopped rolling, when the audience filed out in stunned silence, one truth remained crystal clear: Angelina Jolie had just shown America what it truly meant to be American.